Mark, can you explain to us just how important a census is? Why is it important?
Well, census happens every 10 years. It's a vital piece of information collection for a government. They need to know how many people there are in a country, where they live, what their ages are, the jobs they do, so they can plan public services. Whether that's road transport, do we need to widen this road and dual it? Do we need to put a new primary school here? How's about creating a new A&E? Those are really central questions which are often asked and can only really be answered by information about who lives where.
And what sort of rate of completion is needed to make a census worthwhile?
Well, the completion rate as of today, as I understand it, is about 86%. That's good, and that will provide really useful data at a population level across Scotland. But you really want a higher return rate if you want to pick up smaller fractions within Scottish society. So we're all well aware that people are living longer now, and centenarians, people over the age of 100, are a small but growing part of the population who also are heavy users of public services. We need to know where those people live so we can ensure that they have access to all the things they need to lead a good life. Equally, people in other marginalised or excluded groups for various reasons, and it can be, I was just checking with my son before this, and his friends who are students in Edinburgh, and checking that they'd filled out their census. I'm not going to give you names and addresses. Most had, some hadn't. Now, that matters for Edinburgh City Council. They need to know, again, a sense of what's the population in the city. How do they cater for that? There's lots of really good reasons why people need to do this. And the groups that aren't represented are not always the ones you think of. So it could be the very old, the very young, people moving from rented properties, people who happen to be on holiday during a census date.
At the moment, we're sitting on 86.6% of homes in Scotland have returned. I think the figure is 97% in England, and of course England and Wales, and of course that was last year. Why do you think there might be a disparity in these figures?
Genuinely, that's a quite hard question to answer. One thing I would sort of suggest is that the Scottish census has always taken place in years ending with 1 since 1801 until this year. And that's been the same across the whole of the United Kingdom, apart from Northern Ireland in 1926 and 1937. So there's a sense in which people expect the census to take place in 2011, 2021, 2031. So it's part of your expectation. The other thing that's obviously really important is that if you have the four nations spending money on raising consciousness of the census, that kind of mutually reinforces and supports one another. The other thing that's worth noticing is all the small lobby groups that operate at a UK-wide level that put a lot of effort from small budgets into encouraging people to complete censuses in 2021. And they've perhaps not had the same money or the impetus to do it again in 2022. For example, the travelling community, who put a big effort into this last year.
So would you say that, well, it may be unfair to put that on you, but other political parties in Scotland are saying that in the next census, the Scottish Government has to realign itself with the UK. You can see the merits in that argument.
Absolutely. Northern Ireland, the example of Northern Ireland from the interwar years of the 1920s and 1930s is an interesting one. So after partition, there was a need to obviously create a census in the north and the south of Ireland. And so that was done in 1926, which made it out of line with the rest of the UK. They were planning to bring it back together again in 1941. But of course, the war intervened. And so there was no census that took place across the whole of the UK post 1922 at the same time until 1951. Now, why does that matter? It matters in a very clear way. The Barnett formula. What's the Barnett formula based on? It's based on population. What happens if the population statistics are not comparable? What are the possibilities there for practical problems, but also political argument about going, well, are your figures truly comparable? Do you deserve that amount of money? And I think we can see that that might be a new front, which is not a welcome one. If people can't agree on the data on which they're discussing, then it's a real problem.
That 97% in England and Wales who submitted their census returns, is that fairly typical historically? Have people always been fairly committed to doing it?
The census has been, in the 20th century and into the 21st, something that most people have done. It's normally a very high return rate, so it is surprising it's so low. I know that various reasons have been suggested for it, from COVID to concerns about Ukraine to worries about it being online and people not being used to using paper and struggling to do the online forms. Because the one thing about the online form is it does take a long time. I know this. I did it myself last year, and going through those questions, browsers going down, Wi-Fi going down, people not completing. Because as I understand it, there are quite a few returns that are still not yet complete that people have started but not been able to finish. The other thing perhaps is that in 2021, COVID might have actually led to a higher return rate, because what else were people doing in spring of 2021?
Indeed. Well, Mark, thank you for joining us in Scotland tonight.